When looking at taxation respective to state, local, and government, and we are considering different federal shares that used to be contributed to state and local interest, there has been a dramatic reduction over the course of the last 35 years respective to federal contributions to state and local governments. There statistically is a major problem here. And the major problem has to do with different standards that make no sense, such as a major problem is education. The federal government puts mandatory requirements as strings attached to state that if you do not follow these federal guidelines respective to, in many cases, pre-selected material for schools to utilize, then what ends up happening is we have a plain and simple addressing that says use this stuff or else. You get no funding. And the funding block can actually be more than just the educational monies. It can be other monies that would be going other places. Now, the big problem with this is we have a situation, you can look at Los Angeles, many other areas, 50% of students graduating high school apparently only qualified for burger flipping jobs. There's really no jobs for them. And this is a big, huge problem. There's a huge problem because we have a deliberate educational engineering requirement that is coming in from the federal government. There's other areas as well. I'm not going to completely excuse the state and local areas. But at a federal level, it's making unreasonable requirements that are eliminating base value asset-driven capabilities. This is to say that historically, from the origin of the country, everybody built their own home. It was not a dream to build a home. It was a necessity. You had to do it, or you would die from exposure. So asset generation was at one with all citizens. Every citizen, unless for some reason you just wanted to float around, and those people usually were looked upon as alcoholics, etc., or something like that. Now, many people did also travel quite a bit, but eventually people would settle down, and surprisingly, many of the people who traveled still owned land someplace. They had some kind of homestead. So what has happened over history is that in our modern times, we have effectively banned the concept of teaching practical asset building skills to children and extended the amount of required time that children have to attend schooling. Basically, you now have to attend schooling till you're 18 years of age. 19, depending on your birthday, you can be about 19. So this is a tremendous problem that the government is basically by force engineering dumbness and bringing about the concept of slavery, economic slavery, as a mandate to children, teaching the masses. This makes a huge problem. This means that state and local governments, where people's children are located, basically do not have the skill sets because they've been basically banned from either federal government requirements or state and local requirements from becoming a reality. So there is no options for these children. This means that the economies at a state and local level cannot continue to have a fresh supply of creative people who are going to build hard assets. And in effect, that means that the government doesn't get to print new money based upon brand new hard assets and substantial other styles of near hard assets considered in some cases as though hard assets. So that addresses business and people who make longevous items, furniture, tools, so forth, etc. So we have a situation where economically the model of the economy leaves us with statistical analysis that indicates it's going to be impossible for local and state governments to continue to function, because we also have another factor, and that factor is that historically the amount of money that was provided by the federal government to state and local, much of which, by the way, was connected to the fact that the government was printing balance money to facilitate trade based upon new hard asset generation. And it was sharing with state and local. The amount of state and local contributions in the last 35 years has dramatically been reduced. That means that state and local areas had to invent taxes or raise taxes to fill these gaps of financial shortages. Yet the overall long-term modeling of the engineering of what the federal government is mandating is that the federal government has stepped in the way and put a permanent block on the future of children learning the skill sets that are needed to basically be able to build hard assets. An example here is we go back to 1750. Children basically had basic carpentry, small house carpentry by ages 12 to 14 years of age. So you had skill sets there. You also had a creative partnership and cross-trade system with people who had special skills that might be needed. You also had people getting together for barn raising and other types of items to assist people in building assets. And the government would print money against those hard assets. That's a lot of the ways that the government was getting money. So what we have is a brilliant beginning engineered system that has been continuously sabotaged by viewpoints and demands that are incompetent. This basically wreaks havoc with the concepts of efficiency and the future, the long-term future. There's another statistic, and that is that, we talked about 1750 and moving forward. As you had hard asset skill sets that basically were stapled to every child. This is something that every child was exposed to. When people settle down and make families, these skill sets are there. This doesn't cover your vagrant factor or your traveler loners. But when we're talking about children and the renewing of our population, these skill sets were there. Parties also were looking at, in 1750, a longevity of about 38 years of age as a statistical average. Now it's 78 years of age. But children were expected to grow up fast. You were expected to be building and settling your land and or homestead and building hard assets. Your house, your barn, other items that would be considered as though an upgrade to land, making it a true real estate hard asset upgrade. 15 to 16 years of age was considered to be the norm for this to basically just happen. And that means that you also look at not only that, building and ownership at younger ages, but you're also looking at educational differences that many people did not continue to go to educational services, which in some cases were part-time. They were fewer hours than they are now. So education ended for most people by age 15 or 16. And they were then going to sometimes, or perhaps semi-permanent, take jobs that were cash paying from people who had come up with brilliant ideas and move forward with manufacturing or some sort of services. This cash influx was a tremendous boost to situations involving families, since basically the land was generally already acquired and the most basic shelter, simple homes, was already achieved. So people had, in some cases, more money available if you consider the leveraging buying power of cash money, of liquid. Because people also traded hand to hand many types of items, food, and various other types of items. So a cash job could help people come up very quickly with a fair amount of savings. We don't have the same reflection now. Now, instead of people ending their education at 14, 15, 16, we have a requirement for them to go to age 18. Yet there's no hard asset skill sets that are basically instilled in them. There's also no backing. Effectively, the concept constitutionally that people would be semi-guaranteed for some type of backing to help back them to do development, even though in many cases they didn't necessarily need backing to build a home. They just needed the tools, and they could either buy them or borrow them from somebody else or trade labor, etc. Now we have a system that's engineered where many of these options have been banned or eliminated. They're just simply, in many ways, just not there, just not available, although some people still find ways to achieve this. But the numbers are very small. So, on the whole, when you keep considering these major areas, the statistical analyst layout of this is mind-boggling, because if I'm oversimplistic and I'm a bit blunt about it, we're forcing children to go to school from the earliest stages of their life until age 18, 19, to teach them only to be slaves, wage slaves. That means that there's no possibility for hard asset growth. That means the government doesn't get to print money. By the way, it's crucially important to understand the government makes more money off of people building hard assets. You build a home, they're going to print money against the differential between wholesale versus retail value. Today, that would be about $90,000 a year per person if people were building one small home per year. You can't compare a $90,000 almost freebie management situation of economic trade mandates to facilitate trade, which means the government prints money again. You can't compare $90,000 as an intake versus taxation. Much of the taxation that we have today was never designed to even be there. In fact, according to the Constitution, it's illegal. It's unconstitutional, many forms of taxation. So we cannot have a successful future. It's mathematically impossible. And people who keep trying to reinvent the wheel and invent new taxation to make things work are wasting their time. It's never, ever going to work. The numbers just don't model out. We have to restore the original Constitution. We have to phase out taxation that's not constitutional. And we have to back our citizens financially to be able to build new hard assets on a continual basis so that there is no dead time, so that they are kept at max production. Their labor building a home is worth more money than burger flipping or all these services jobs. Because if you take a burger flipping job, you're going to see people pay how much money? They get a little better job than that, and then how much money is that? And a little better job than that, how much money is... It's not coming anywhere near the $90,000 average goal that the government should be collecting at a federal level, at just a federal level. And that means the federal government could restore many of the amounts of money that have been removed from state and local governments. This is crucial it's crucial to restore this. So we have to completely overhaul the model. The models I've designed work completely differently. They're constitutional models. They work very, very well. They help people basically work 5 years and be able to retire, just like people could do in the colonial age, in the original foundation of our country. And if we don't return to that, and by the way, this is not returning to agrarianism, it's returning to the most basic rights of people to build and own their own roof over their head. All we're going to have is slavery. And the greed factor keeps rising to the point where the demand for goods is ridiculous. We have people paying 6,000% more than the item is worth because of greed factors. This is what has eventually happened. So we have non-fair markets on charging for goods and in some services in some instances that are grossly unfair. And that is due to backwards engineering. So I'm going to close again and say it's impossible. What people are trying to work with is impossible. The model can't work. You can't say, you children must take these courses that are only going to qualify you to flip burgers or maybe something a little better, and then ban them from building. This is going to bankrupt the entire government. It's going to ruin the country financially. We are in a desperate state of emergency to restore economic balance. And that means we have to restore it back to not only each and every citizen, but each and every child.